Hi, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us to Ocean Nexus webinar in June. This event is presented by Nippon Foundation Ocean Nexus. Nippon Foundation is an international philanthropic organization with a mission to support social innovation and humanitarian efforts, thriving to realize a society in which all people support one another. Nippon Foundation Ocean Nexus, which I'm the director, Yoshiota, is a global network of scholars who conduct ocean-focused research with empathy, applying an anti-inequity approach that draws on anti-racist, anti-colonial, and intersectional analysis. Our mission is to establish social equity as a central objective of ocean governance. The Ocean Nexus webinar, what we're gathering here for, invites everyone interested in issues of ocean equity to join us at Ocean Equity Learning Forum, which is our website. So all the information that we present over here, either you can find it in the chat, our communication officer, Area 1, will actually put those references on the chat. So if we don't know what we are talking about, you can just look into the chat and there will be a reference. And any other informations that you need to learn, including the recording of this session, you can find it in the Ocean Equity Learning Forum. I'm sure Ariel is working on to put the link right now on the chat. During these meetings, we welcome your question. And so if you have any questions, just put it into the Q&A and we'll pick up after we finish this panel discussion. Okay, now I'm going to move to our main focus today, which is marine plastic pollution and social equity updates. So almost 2 months ago, just time flies so quickly. There is a fourth session of Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, which to develop an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, and including in marine environment, which took place in Ottawa in Canada. And a bunch of the people came up and had a very important conversation about how we're going to solve or address or mitigate or hopefully not adapt, but we might have to, for marine plastic pollution. And there are a few crucial pieces of the puzzles which we're discussing, like, global standardized regulations and, what we can do with solution design and what is a management or waste management capacity we need to put and what are more important conversations we need to have. But in Ocean Nexus, which we're really looking into marine plastic as an equity issue, we really wanted to discuss what is and who is responsible. What are the knowledges we should include? And what is the issue with plastic and our well-being? Is it nano coming into our things, or is it the fisherman who actually has been displaced due to the plastic pollutions? And what are the coordination do we need internationally? Do we need to hear about the industry more, or do we need to hear about the community more? And what are the missing voices we really need to highlight too? So I am delighted, to invite my colleagues and dare I say friends, Tricia Falladay, who's the coordinator of the Scientists Coalition for an Effective Plastic Treaty, which is over 350 members from more than 60 countries. It's just really the coalition, really to push to find these issues and have effective plastic treaty. Tricia was Massey University professor and now senior research scientist of transdisciplinary science group of Cawthron Institute. I'm so sorry. It's just my bad. Right? I still have to look into it and then think about the pronunciation. My bad. And so, Tricia is right on the act and on action, and her amazing expertise, which you guys can actually see it in her publication, including edited volume or edited book of Plastic Legacy, which everybody should have a look at it. Will be Great. So Tricia has been to this INC meetings, and she's going to give us some update. Also, we have Rufino Varea. Rufino and I met about a month ago through Tricia, and I read Rufino's wonderful report named Tangled Waters, Equity-Based Study of Plastic Pollution Impacts on Indigenous Communities in Fiji. Real sort of interview-based and community-based research, really to highlight what is the issue. People tend to use global issues and global problems, and they're not really looking into global problem is actually a local problem. That's why it's global and it's problem. So it's really wonderful report. And so I'm delighted to have Rufino join us. Rufino now is Regional Director of PCAN, which is Pacific Island Climate Action Network. And I'm hoping to hear both from you. But Tricia, do you want to kind of like introduce you and what you're doing now? And perhaps including, introducing Rufino just a little bit, because, my introduction is probably not doing the justice to introduce who you are. Would you mind doing that?
That was a great introduction, actually, Yoshi. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I guess I've been working in the plastics treaty space since UNEA 3, the third United Nations Environment Assembly in 2017. And that UNEA process, the United Nations Environment Assembly process, got us to the point where we now have a mandate or a resolution 5/14, which is essentially an agreement that there would be an international negotiating committee convened to develop this global plastics treaty, which has been described as kind of the next really big deal in terms of multilateral environmental agreements. It's as big as the Paris Agreement, but we're hoping it will be a lot more effective than that agreement. And so the Scientist Coalition really started at the beginning of INC1. That's the first international negotiating committee in Uruguay, Punta del Este, Uruguay. And now we've just finished INC4, the fourth of those meetings, and moving into the final negotiating meeting or session to finalize really the text of this global plastics treaty. There is talk it might go on a little bit further, but we're hoping that we will have what we need to protect humanity really from plastic pollution by the end of the meeting at INC5 in Busan, South Korea, November, December. And Rufino is amazing. Rufino's been with us for some time as well. Met Rufino a few years back now. Rufino will be able to give me days and dates more accurately than me this morning, I'm sure. But we met in Suva at the University of South Pacific, came and talked to them, to the university through Rufino about the treaty, and gathered together a group of postgraduate students there who are working on plastic pollution. Amazing students, and Rufino was one of those students leading the bunch, and then went on to help support his PhD, which is under examination at the moment, which is all very much related to the ecotoxicology of plastic pollution, but also with an equity kind of angle to that. And Rufino's amazing. He's an ecotoxicologist, but he's also a social scientist, trained social scientist. He's an Indigenous researcher, and he has some incredible connections with Pacific Island countries, and also with the International Indigenous Peoples Caucus, which has also been incredibly involved in the in the plastics treaty negotiations. And that also has links to our Indigenous group in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the Tangata Whenua Coalition for an Effective Plastics Treaty. But I'll hand over to Rufino. I'm sure he'll be able to introduce himself far better than I did as well. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you. Rufino, would you mind just sharing a little bit about like how did you get into what you're doing? Not really PCAN, but like including your report. So it's really in the marine issues. And I would like to explain to all the audiences, we're doing this because we wanted to make sure that everybody knows where we come from. So this is our way of just, clarifying our positionality. So if you can just take it this way, I mean, that'd be really great. And we'll show that we're going to get into INC4 soon. But Rufino, can you just tell us how you get into it, and how did you find through your talking to the community and talking to seniors and about the plastic, and what's the difference between what they're talking about and then what is global? Just tell us a little bit about it to start with.
Sure. Just very briefly, thank you so much for the wonderful introductions. Just very briefly about my background and how that led me on this journey that I'm on now. I did my undergraduate studies in environmental studies. It was a Bachelor of Arts. It was human geography focused. And it wasn't until I started my master's that I moved into the natural sciences and did a master's in marine science, looking at the impacts, looking at ways in which we can conduct environmental risk assessments using different biochemistry techniques. And then I moved on to doing my PhD. During my PhD, one of the things that I realized was how can we get more people to care about this issue, and why we should be conducting more environmental risk assessments. Most of the time in this space, it can be very technical, and there is that missing human element to it. And so I had applied for this writing grant, and I was assigned Tricia, and I was so glad that I won, that we were able to work together on that piece. It was an amazing publication that we did together. And so I decided then it is very important to balance the sciences with this, bringing into this conversation the impact on not just the environment but also on people. And we're looking at people. It's like in the report that I wrote. It's very holistic. It's covering their everyday lives. All the way down to their livelihood security and their future, and also their children's future. And so yeah, that's how I came into this space.
Rufino, thank you very much, and congratulations on your submission of the PhD thesis. We're all looking forward to reading full piece of it. But anybody who's interested in his report, it's in the chat, isn't it, Ariel? Thank you so much. If it's not, we're featured in LinkedIn. Okay, so let's gonna talk about INC, or what's going on with the plastic treaty. Everybody's really interested in, and we just want to hear from equity voices and from the justice perspective. So Tricia, would you mind sort of give us your take of this most recent INC4 meetings? Can you tell us, it's okay, you can talk as much as you can about okay, what has been going through since Uruguay, there has been any progress, any hope going on, or if there's anything new or achievement or win in INC4, what are they? And what will still be considerations that we need to think about? I mean, you don't have to answer all three, but let's start the conversation with one of those, please.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot I can say in response to that question. So we might come back if I start and I haven't quite covered everything. I guess I'll start with okay, so if we start with INC4 specifically in terms of what we got out of that, what was the achievement of INC4, if I could start there, because it's always good to start with a positive note. And so I think the achievement for us was something we didn't achieve in the previous session. We didn't achieve in INC3. The mandate to go away and do work in between these big sessions. So between INC4 and INC5, for example, what we have achieved is what we call intersessional work. And the intersessional work is to progress the treaty that can move incredibly slowly. And there's good reasons why sometimes progress moves more slowly than others. And I would say that it's largely down to the less ambitious countries and industry influence over the plastic treaty negotiations as well. And when I say industry, I'm talking about petrochem, plastics industries who really have an investment in directing this in such a way that we have a more diluted version or a softer version of what we could have at the end of these negotiations. So what we achieved are these intercessionals. As I say, it means that if we have these meetings, these intercessional meetings, we can progress things more quickly, more efficiently, get things done that we need to have done. There's a lot to be done still before November in Busan. And so we have now before us two expert groups that have been given the mandate to convene between now and INC5. One of those expert groups is dedicated to really the financial mechanisms and the sort of institutionalization part, I guess, of the treaty. And the other part, and those mechanisms as well on that first one might also sort of touch on capacity building and financial capacity, which is incredibly important for developing countries, small island developing states, for example. And the other is really more science-based expert group, which is where our scientist coalition is really has the expertise to offer. That expert group is going to be looking at plastics, chemicals, but only as they're associated with polymers and sustainable production and consumption of products. So really, we were hoping we were going to get specific intercessional work dedicated to plastics, chemicals. We didn't get that. However, there is the potential for plastics, chemicals to be included in the second expert group, the expert group for the intercessional work. That whilst it really is focused on product design and systems design around these sustainable production and consumption, the Scientist Coalition position and ambitious countries and civil society organisations would say that, well, we can't have any of that without safe, hazard-free plastic chemicals, 16,000 of which we know are associated with plastics. And we know also that 1% of plastics chemicals, and I'm not talking about all chemicals, but chemicals that are associated with plastics, only 1% of those are regulated under any other global agreement. And so there's a huge gap there that this treaty could fill to ensure that we're protected from those hazardous chemicals in our plastics today, but also in our alternative plastics, those so-called bioplastics, those bio-based and biodegradable plastics, compostable plastics, and so on. So that would be the one big takeaway that we have. But if you wanted me to go on, I could talk about the real inequity issues associated with those groups that we are embroiled with at the moment. If you wanted me to continue, Yoshi, I can also speak to that.
Can I just recap? And Rufino, so sorry. I mean, this is really open webinar, and I'm hoping everybody who's working on the ocean governance to just start understanding what's going on with marine plastic. That's the aim of it. So Tricia, for me, like I need to understand, okay, they've been talking for 4 times already. And they only agreed to have an expert group now between the sessions. That sounds great. I mean, I wonder why they didn't do it before, but anyway. So, and what you're saying is they have sort of like 2 main experts group. One is more like institutions and the design and governance and all that, right? Representation. And the other one is more on the science. And the institution part, we'll talk about the equity part. So we're just going to leave it for now. But the science part, what you are saying sounds more like, okay, they're looking into products rather than, the harm already out there, including impacts or well-being issues or, chemical issues in toxic issues. Is that right? Or are they looking both? I couldn't really get, when you talk about like science focus on a product, what does it really mean?
So, no, that's a good question. Will that expert group be talking about the impacts? And I think because the mandate of the treaty is to look at the full life cycle of plastics, and all of this is open for interpretation. You see, Yoshi. So, yes. But if you were to ask the Scientist Coalition, that full life cycle includes everything right from the extraction the just and equitable, safe, sustainable, transparent extraction of any of the feedstocks used to produce any kind of plastic. And again, we're talking about conventional fossil fuel-based plastics that we know that constitute the majority of what we have in our world today, accumulating and persisting in our environment as well. But also the biomass, the bio-based feedstocks for those alternatives that we see really starting to ramp up in our global markets with really no regulations attached to those at all. And we're finding that there are more and more toxic chemicals associated with those, in fact, than the conventional fossil fuel plastics. So it goes all the way from extraction right through to, cracking and production and manufacture of products and, consumption from users, safe use and management, so that there we start talking about recycling and even composting. And then we go all the way through, though, further than that. And most who talk about full life cycle don't go further. And we go further to talk about, and we also need to ensure that we have equitable, safe, just and sustainable removal of plastics from the environment.
Right.
And also the decontamination of sites that have been contaminated, where in fact we can still do that, considering it's virtually impossible to remove micro nanoplastics from the environment once it's there, which is why we have to focus on the top of the pipe. So in the expert group, in answer to your question, if they take that full life cycle approach, even if we're focusing on product design, for example, that full life cycle would have to be taken into the equation. But we need to get our right experts there. This is the crux. We need to get the right experts there to ensure that all of that is captured in a holistic and integrated and just and equitable manner.
Thank you, Tricia. When we hear about the full life cycle, now I'm educated through the report we have done. Thank you for Jessica Vandenberg and your co-author. Full life cycle actually means from extraction all the way to the recycling. It's not just recycling goes around. So that's really what we need to be aware of.
And beyond recycling. Beyond. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. And thanks for the Science Coalitions who's addressing these issues. And now I'm going to Rufino, to you. You coming from as much as biochemistry expertise, but also you heard the voices, and so do you, Tricia, but from Fiji and through your report and work. When you went to this INC negotiations, you were there, and how did you feel, about the progress, from the eyes of both biochemistry / indigenous expert, if I can, call it that way. What is your take from that negotiation?
Thanks, Yoshi, and thanks so much, Tricia, for giving that amazing foundation. So, I mean, I followed other multilateral environment agreements, and I understand how incredibly slow it can be. So it was no surprise to me when progress was very little, or very little progress is being made in the initial parts of the INC process. Although from an indigenous perspective, I would say that immediately looking at some of the solutions, global solutions that were being proposed, such as circular economy and all these different terms that we're hearing, full life cycle. These are really taken from indigenous worldviews and indigenous values. This whole idea of circularity, rejuvenation, and so on, and seeing this being given some value to a product that has an end of life, a product that is toxic to the environment, to human health, and being promoted as a potential solution to the problems that we are facing, especially in a country like Fiji, where we're on the receiving end of the issue. And majority of our population are indigenous, and they're taking these worldviews without the principles and values that come with it. And so it risks developing what could be really great solutions, but because there's very little space for inclusion of indigenous peoples at the negotiating table to bring in the values that they have held for many generations and know how to apply it to concepts like that, that has been, one of the biggest challenges I've seen.
Rufino, can I say, so, there are people who are there and then who just wanting to be extremely pragmatic in their own terms. They're probably just going to say, well, look, the agenda we have for this INC4 is capacity building and then financial mechanism. So basically they're saying like, look, you guys like need to know about the plastic, need to know about the pollution, need to know how to do recycling, need to know all these treatment, and then you also need to have the money to do it. That's basically kind of like a, the what's behind those two agendas. But Rufino, what you're saying is very different. And from country like Fiji or any other countries who are sort of like a receiving end of it, what do you think will be need, for and for those INC4 to include it in the conversations? I mean, they kept on talking about like capacity and the finance mechanism. What is not covering by those finance and capacity building in INC4 from your eyes?
Yeah, it all goes back to this thing I always say. It's like when people talk about empowerment, right? Capacity building is like a form of empowerment. We are already empowered.
Exactly.
This is about power sharing. And so when the conversation around capacity building and finance, I feel like these are just excuses being thrown around. And again, I would say like when we think about this problem from our position, there is we are at the front line of this global issue, and whatever decision is made will literally impact our future. We are already seeing how devastating the impacts of plastic pollution is, not just on our environment, but on our people and their health. And so, and we also understand the urgency of the issue. We also understand why this process has been given a short time frame, because we need to address this problem. It is a serious issue. We understand that. But it also, and this is where, like the Scientist Coalition and independent scientists, we lean on them to help and echo our concerns and our voices, because they're literally giving this space, clarity, away from all the noise that is usually pushed out through industry messaging, about plastics are safe, plastics are important, we need to deliver safe, clean water to people, and only plastics can do that. And the sciences can demonstrate otherwise, or false otherwise. And so completely understand the approach that is being taken, but like again, I may not necessarily agree with everything. And yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you. That's huge. I mean, I also seen kind of like where the narrative is going. It started with, oh, we need to do recycle, life cycle, and circular economy. There's a solution, and it's all win-win-win. And suddenly there is a pushback. Industry has to cut back their productions. You have to sort of turn off the tap. I mean, that's really important. And then it just went to, oh, we need to consider about the remedy. And there's just people who's making like a living out of the plastic productions, and also waste management. We have to consider them. And then we actually going to start talking about, oh, there's another plastic. It's going into the neuro, it's really issues of our health. So it's just narrative changes going through very different directions. And I don't know, where it's going now in IMC4. Tricia, can you tell us, where is it going? I mean, are they still talking about those four things, or is it in the past? And are we talking about something else now in the international intergovernmental negotiations? What is the main topic they're talking about? Are they talking about like who's going to pay for it? Are they talking about like cut off the production? Are they talking about we need to take care of the people making money out of plastic? What are they talking over there?
Yeah, that really is $1 million question, because we're still waiting for a synthesized text of the treaty. We've got a 70-pager with thousands of square brackets, and those square brackets are this is to be negotiated, could be left out, we don't know. Right. So it really does feel like a synthesized version of everybody's laundry list, everybody's wish list is all there in the synthesized document we're likely to see probably next week from the Secretariat. So right. Really. But I will say, you didn't talk about production. Will production be in there? And we've been wanting to get more push for primary plastic polymer production reduction. Lots of P's in there, but essentially what that means is we really want to see a global, really ambitious target, baselines and targets for global primary plastic production, which is virgin plastics, never been used before polymers, not recycled polymers, but never been used polymers. Again, both fossil fuel based and the bio-based. So all plastics, a real cut in production, and a target for that, but also national targets for national implementation plans, so global and national targets. And so now, we wanted to see quantifiable, measurable targets with time-bound phase out for these things, or bans on certain types of chemicals, particularly. We haven't seen enough push for that, because otherwise we'd see that in the expert group meetings and the intercessions, I would suggest. It doesn't mean that's off the table, but really that is the make or break. I think it's the plastics, chemicals, and it's the PPP reduction targets. So that we really need to see back on the table and really emphasized between now and INC5 if we're going to see a really effective treaty, because our scientists have estimated that if we were to reduce primary plastic production by 1 to 3% per annum up to 2040, we wouldn't even scratch the surface of the global plastics climate crisis, and we're going to see 20,000 million tons of plastic production, or plastics accumulated in our environment by 2040, unless we do something really drastic here.
Thank you very much, Rufino. The impact is you're saying global, but from the endpoint, surely they talked about like capacity building, and then they start talking about like financial mechanism to it, and then you already mentioned, we need a much more sort of a perspective from the indigenous eyes. We need really to let them consider our own values. But for the community, you interview the chief and you interview the people over there, what do you think they immediately need? So I'm just being a little bit from, negotiation to what you're seeing in the community. What is urgent things that you really need to wanting to communicate to the audiences, what has been seen and potentially what has been really talked in those INC4?
Yeah, thank you, Yoshi. And I just like to mention before I answer that is there's really no escaping plastic pollution for us. The current crisis situation that we are facing, there's no escaping it, and we cannot recycle our way out of this problem. And the reason why we have been pushing to, when we're talking about plastic pollution, it's not just when it becomes waste, it is from production, because where we are right now in our current situation, more and more plastics being produced is going to make its way into our environment. We do not have the capacity to deal with what we currently, the current crisis on the ground, in addition to legacy plastics that we have no solution for. And so what we need to do is to stop production stop extraction, stop production, so that we can focus on how we can deal with this current crisis. For the people on the ground, like people in communities, it's come to the point where, you know, landfills are at capacity. We've had to find other ways to deal with the plastic problem. And so we see the creation of informal landfills, or where land is being dug up to bury plastics. And many times, because of the lack of space, you'll see that these sites are near the coastal environment, like near the beach
Yes.
area, near the ocean.
Yes.
And because of, we're also dealing not just with the plastics crisis, we're dealing with sea level rise, which is again creating erosion and causing all these other buried plastics to make its way into the environment. And so the burden of the ocean temperatures that is already harming our coral reefs, and then you add the entanglement and pollution of all these plastics and toxic chemicals into these important ecosystems that we depend on for our livelihood security. You know, the loss and the damage that is incurred because of these problems is really devastating. It's creating livelihood insecurities. We have also heard that, you know, because some of these communities are located near the landfills, and one of the ways to deal with a lot of these problems, these waste problems, is to burn it. And so you have these toxic
Yes.
fumes engulfing, you know, communities, and they are exposed to these harmful um, smog and all those chemicals associated with it. So it is a real issue. We've also heard like people who, because in the Pacific, one of the forms of cooking is in an earth oven. So we dig a hole in the ground, and then, you know, we heat stones and to a certain temperature, and then we place food on top, and then we cover it with leaves and let it cook. And one of the forms of, you know, heating or cooking fuel is plastics. And so, you know, you're covering food with, over hours, that is being, you know, steamed with all these toxic fumes as well. um it's becoming very, very difficult to deal with. And that is why this uh, we know that we cannot deal with it alone as a country or as a region. We need a global effort, we need a global response, and that is why this treaty is so important.
Rufino, surely people who's burning plastic knows it's like it smells funny, you know, it's toxic. I mean, you know, they don't really want to create the food with it, you know. And why do you think they need to do that? It's just my
I
natural
mean, if
question to it, you know?
I mean it here's the thing, like,
Yeah.
you hear for so many years what good plastics does, right? Sanitary, it's, you know, it's always been associated with things that are good for human health. And so, like, you know, then you take something that has been, you know, pushed across as necessary, important, essential, and you don't think that, you know, is this really, you don't really ask yourself, is this really causing all these issues to me? And you take that to a remote um, community that does not have access to internet, does not have access to these scientific findings that we all know, everyone here knows now. Um, of course, it's, you know, of course the lack of awareness will be there, and not everyone will really understand how burning plastics or using it as cooking fuel can be harmful. No one really thought about like how just open cooking using log wood uh, raises the risk of cancer. And again, here in the Pacific, uh, women in rural areas, the incidences of breast cancer is much higher because of open cooking, open fire cooking, compared to women in urban areas who use, like, you know, gas stoves. No one thinks about these things in intricate detail until the problem has until the damage has been caused.
Yes. Yes.
And it's the same with plastics. It's the
Yes.
same as using plastics as cooking fuel.
Kind of like a very mixed message, people actually like giving it for their own benefit rather than considering the well-being of the people who's receiving it. I think that really is a problem. But okay, now, so before we go into the open question, Tricia, Rufino, well, both of you, I wanted to ask you, okay, so little, I'm not a believer in sort of like ending with a good note and all that, but we just wanted to hear, okay, in those negotiations, or even in general, do you actually see the role of industries, the working positively? Is there anything that we should be aware? Is there anyone doing a good thing, or it's not really the case yet, and we're just hoping that you might move towards that way? Do you have any comment on the role of industry? Tricia, let's go with you. Yes.
Actually, this is a good question because I wanted to also add the conversation with Rufino, and I can tie this together. So what Rufino is talking about here, and the lack of knowledge or information or the science around what's going on with perhaps cooking with plastics, this is the lack of understanding about the complexities, particularly of the toxicity of plastics, is not something that small island developing state communities are unaware of. Everybody is unaware of.
I'm not aware of that. Yeah.
No, and it's yeah, exactly. And we do things. People are putting their plastics in microwaves even when it says microwavable safe, thinking it's safe. Why? And this is coming to your question, Yoshi, because there's no regulation around this. There's no disclosure of information from producers required for consumers to know how to use their products safely and how to sustainably manage those plastics at the end of their useful life. There's no requirement for that. And as I say, only 1% of the chemicals used in plastics are regulated under any global agreement. So there's certainly no labeling requirement for our products to inform anybody. And I'm not just talking about consumers, I'm also talking about supply chain actors. I mean, recyclers don't know what is safely and sustainably recyclable, what can be commingled in a way that isn't going to produce more non-intentionally added substances, more toxic chemicals. They don't know, what's in the products that they're trying to deal with further on down the pipeline. That's problematic. So yes, in answer to your question, we do need to work with industry. However, we also need to keep the science independent from industry, because the problem we're having, probably one of the major challenges that the Scientists Coalition is having through this process, is that the messages, the narrative, the science has been corrupted by some industry science. There's some good industry scientists, don't get me wrong. However, when their science is kind of filtered through their PR, people, and is the science is communicated, including to negotiators in these negotiations, the facts get messed up. The science is misrepresented, it's inaccurate, and it's incredibly dangerous. Yes. So we will continue to work independently without any industry funding, even though we've been offered a lot of industry funding or funding from those with ties to industry, to enable us to ensure, and also to make sure that the negotiators who we primarily work for, that they know, they're reassured they're getting the science that's not tied up in vested interests.
Thank you. That's really tremendous work. Rufino, coming back to the Pacific Island states or any island states are really kind of like on the edge of these issues. Like you said, landfill is not forever, and it's just really affecting anywhere we go. We're seeing that, and people pretend not to see it, but it's not just on the island states, but even out the island of Japan, it's really filled with plastics. Anywhere we go, we cannot not see on the beach. And so, was there any opportunity in INC 1 to 4 to really hear those voices? And then I suppose they're very limited. What do you think we need to really emphasize those voices coming from island states? What kind of what is the capacity or opportunities that those island states actually really needed?
Well, the Pacific is really now taking on a leadership role in this space. We can see how they've become more vocal. They have ensured that that their presence are really captured in the negotiation space. And because in these meetings they vote as there's a single voting block for the Pacific Islands, and then we have other groups of countries that we work with through, for example, the Alliance of Small Island States, which Samoa is currently the chair.
Yes.
And so we're trying to utilize these spaces in a very wise and strategic way to ensure that more countries are aligned to the calls for action, global action needed to address this problem, this full life cycle of plastic pollution. So yeah, there is a lot at play. There's a lot at stake. And we're just really trying to be wise about it. We see that now more and more countries, but also civil society groups and even independent scientist groups are interested in working with Pacific Island countries because interests are aligned, or there are several priority areas that they see as value to try and work and enhance and engage with them on and support their work and support their negotiation strategies. So it's been really they've progressed a lot through this process.
Thank you so much. Now we've got 10 minutes or 11 minutes, so I'm gonna open the floor to the audience. If you guys have any questions, just type it at the Q&A, or you could actually speak up. Can they speak up, Ariel, if they wanted to? Or
we can unmute their mics, but it's best to use the Q&A box.
Yeah, is there anything? Only not yet?
Not yet, we just started.
Okay.
2 minutes.
While we're waiting, thank you, Rufino and Tricia. I'm sure we're going to run out of time, so I'm going to thank you before we address into any questions. We're still waiting for it. Okay, if there's no question, I'm going to ask, for INC 5, you talked a few things that we are hoping for. Okay, let's get right experts for intersessional process, or let's really consider PPP standardization, really just address the transparency in the production. Let's really consider indigenous perspective in the knowledges and the actual reality is facing these issues in the island states, which including this formal, landfills and all this. So you addressed a few things. In INC 5, what is the things that you really wanted to speak? The potentially, even towards for the INC 6. Do we have INC 6, or is a 5 last one? It's a 5 last one.
There's not another one.
Oh, sorry, I'm a bit embarrassed.
There could be.
Right, there could be. There you go. So if you have anything, can you share with us?
Do you want me to start, Rufino? Okay.
Rufino, wait, Tricia, wait. I'm so sorry. Now yes, I see the question. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Anonymous attendees. Great. To any of you, what support can universities provide to your work? Brilliant. Right. Yeah. Can you guys tell us a little bit about, whatever you think the universities can provide support to your work?
Rufino, do you want to start there?
I was just gonna give an example of how
that'd be great. Please do.
No, I was just gonna say there's this the senior scientist in the Scientist Coalition, and what he usually does with his students is that he tries to bring them into these spaces, to get a sense of experience through this work. So it's not just really the science that they're working on, but also how to apply their knowledge in spaces like this where it's really important. So for universities, I would say, as much as possible, there's so many ways you can get involved without necessarily having to attend. Advocating on these issues, and encouraging more research into this problem can be so useful. Every little change, every little action that you do that influences change can change or transform the realities of people on the receiving end, like us in the Pacific. So, like, yeah, I'll just say that. But
that's
I know
great.
Tricia will have a lot of
Thank you, Tricia. What would you say?
better advice on this.
I would have said that. That was a great answer. And we will always welcome new and emerging researchers in plastic pollution in the Scientists Coalition. So it's really important to bring up, bring, as Rufino says, new scientists with fresh ideas into the space, and connect the dots also with other disciplines as well. And as you can hear, Rufino's works quite radically across different disciplines. We just so desperately need more of that. And if we have scientists that are trained in one area, we encourage them to explore other disciplines and connect with those as well.
Thank you. Tricia, can I just ask, what is the, what is the expertise that we kind of like needed right now towards INC 5? What do you think desperate? I'm just calling for anyone if you're there. Yeah.
Three things. I think Indigenous scientists is absolutely number one, top of the list. Community sciences, so citizen science, is really, really important as well. The scientists we have in the Scientists Coalition, a lot of the work that they do is, can be quite disconnected from the frontline and fence line communities and the communities that are most disproportionately affected by plastics. It's really important to have that knowledge and expertise to the table. Science communication and science policy nexus.
Thank you so much. That's great. So 2 more questions from Ina. Hi, Ina. Thank you. Can you elaborate on how the principle of common but differentiated responsibility is being discussed at this stage in the negotiation? Very specific. Nice one, Ina. Tricia, can you take this?
I can take it, or Rufino can probably also take it too.
Oh,
would you like
sorry
to
about that.
Rufino?
Either of you.
Okay, all right, good. So common but differentiated responsibilities can have positive outcomes, but they can also have negative outcomes. What it assumes is that they're not one size fits all in terms of policy and application or implementation for the treaty. So for example, small island developing states, they have their own challenges. So therefore, the bar could potentially drop for them in meeting their obligations to the treaty under that principle. However, that doesn't exclude everybody as a global community from meeting obligations to all combine together to address the global plastics crisis. So everybody has responsibilities, including those with some challenges. The point is that the sentence needs to be finished. For those communities like small and developing states, and that means that the global community has to get together to help to support them, to bring them up to meet their obligations by then inserting capability. Finances is a really big one through a financial body under the treaty is what's needed. And those finances need to be there to support small and developing states, developing countries, to also ensure they can protect themselves from plastic pollution, regardless of their financial and capacity challenges.
Great. So don't let them get away with just paying the money, yeah?
Right.
Absolutely no. So the last question, Ianzu, thank you, Ianzu, for being here. You often wonder what geographical scale should microplastics regulations be implemented on to be most effective? So what is the most effective scale for microplastic relations? Is it like a local scale or would it be global? I mean, what she's asking, you know, sometimes she just wonders about it. Rufino, you think you can take this?
Yeah. Well, like I said, the microplastics regulation needs to be implemented globally.
Right.
But of course, you know, we've heard some concerning reports or articles that have come out to say, oh, you know, there are parts of Asia that are the largest contributors of plastic pollution globally, and we're like, you see, shifting
Right.
the blame, and then
Right.
saying like we need to police these the issue in these countries or in these
Yeah.
regions or these geographical areas. No, that's not it. And it's similar to exactly what you said, just spoke about when it comes to common but differentiated responsibilities.
Right.
For example, like when the Pacific started banning single-use plastics, you know, we were the first to do that, to take that step globally. And then we had other countries, much more developed countries, also coming forward and, hey, we're doing the same thing, and we're like, actually, you can do more. So you should do more. It's you shouldn't be following the bar that we're setting. This is the most we can do. So it's similar to that, I would say.
I agree. I agree. We should do more, like immediately. And yeah, no, thank you so much. So, well, Tricia, Rufino, it's time. So thank you so much for both of you. You know, I'm hoping to have another one after IMC5. And really let us, you know, keep us updated. You know, I really appreciate it as much as give us such an insight. And you know, the audience, anybody who wants to join Science Coalition of Plastic Pollution, please contact us and we can just introduce you to Tricia, or go just, you know, straight to the website, which probably Ariel putting on. So thank you both of you. I'm going to pass it to Ariel to close this session. Thank you. Ariel?
Thank you.
Ariel, you're mute.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you believe this is our fourth webinar? If you want to learn more about this theme, which is ocean pollution and well-being, check out this QR code and also just go on our website. And then just to close it out, to keep connected, we're constantly publishing critical environmental justice concepts. And please go to our blog, which is oceannexus.org/blog. You can learn about the latest thoughts introducing environmental sociology and its importance for ocean science. Thank you so much for joining.
Okay, thank you very much for joining, Rufino, Tricia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yoshi.
Thank you so much,
Ariel.
Yoshi. Thank you, Ariel.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Ariel. Bye.
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 Bye-bye.